Well, here we are. Very first day of We Build Houses Incorporated. Kind of thought it would be important to take a look back a little bit and bring everybody up to speed with what we've been doing with our company. Uh, Initially, when we started this with this idea, I searched out individuals who would actually fit the idea that I had. Our idea was to have a development company that specifically focused in on single family residential houses, and not houses that we were going to contract for or to put out for other people, but that we as a development company would put out kind of like a spec build. I'm kind of running a track model, same house but in different locations. That way it helps us to be able to systemize us and get us to be where we're developing a little bit quicker. With that in mind, I thought it would be important to kind of bring everybody up to speed with how we started this whole thing. We started this thing with what's called a founder's agreement. Founder's agreement is very important because if you don't have a contractual agreement, so to speak, between the people that are going to be on your team, then nobody knows what's going on, what the hell's happening. Founders agreements start off with there's templates out there all over the place on the internet. You could look those up, AI generated, all that. So it's very easy today. Anybody today that doesn't start off their corporation with a founders agreement, setting yourself off on the wrong path, because founders agreement is a blueprint for how you're going to conduct your business moving forward. It isn't worth anything if you don't have it. So many people out there I work with other companies that are set up as an LLC, for example, simple operating agreement, but they're not following it, and it's just their structures are terrible. The liabilities they think are going to be hidden by the LLC, but in reality that's not the truth. Commingling of funds occurs, these things that are happening. If you don't know what to do, stick around in this little video and hopefully I could tell you a little bit at the end. You'll understand what the importance of a founder's agreement is. Founders agreements are contained inside of them are, for example, roles and responsibilities. Who's doing what? Who's doing what when? My role, for example, in our founders agreement is that I'm doing the corporate structures and I'm also setting up the deals as we move forward. Melissa, for example, her agreement is that she's going to be running the operations and she'll be bringing the licenses into the corporation. Jim Korfman, our vice president, his roles and responsibilities are that he's bringing in the financing and he's bringing in the good credit and he's bringing in his knowledge of how he's actually run his stores and operations in the past. He had a paint company, so he's really good with inventories and he's really good with that kind of stuff. And he has a great personality, which is very important as you're moving forward when you're dealing with other people, not to have somebody who's on a power trip, for example. Second part of that is like the equity. Equity ownership is basically how much of the company are you going to own? How many shares of the stock are you going to have? What are you going to be doing with that? How is that distributed amongst the team members and stuff? Because when you're starting up, there isn't a lot of money that's going to be running through, not a lot of cash flow. So most founders start off with the equity. They're looking forward to how much this company is going to make me as we move forward. And it's a percentage ownership, basically, is the way it works. And with that in mind also is like the initial capital. Who's bringing in the initial capital? What amount of monies am I bringing in? What amount of monies are you bringing in? It all has to be delineated. Otherwise, it's make it up as you go just doesn't work. There's sweat equity, for example. I could be able to do this because I have the skills to do that, as an example. With that also is an idea of the budget that you're going to have. What are we going to spend our monies on, to moving forward? We decided one of the more important things for us to do would be to onboard a project management software, because as we get this thing up and running fast, you have to have something in order to track what you're doing, because if you don't, you get lost in the weeds too easily. Another thing that's important in a founder's agreement is decision making. Like, who's making these decisions? Is it me? What decisions am I making? Is it you? What decisions are you making? You have to have this written down. Anybody with us, we are a development company, which is basically in essence a contractor, but we develop the projects from the beginning all the way through end, financing all the way from the beginning to the end, everything for the end user. Those are some of the decisions that have to be made, So who's doing those decisions? Write it down. Because if you don't, like I said, once you start getting off into the weeds, you're going to lose. You'll fail. And nobody wants to see that. Compensation. Who's getting paid what? When are we getting paid? How are the distributions going to be for if we land a big project and make a ton of money? How are we moving those monies around? Compensation is important because nobody's into this for free. Nobody wants to sit there and pretend like we're going to put a company together and then like that we're millionaires, billionaires. It just doesn't happen that way. You have to have a plan for who's getting paid what. Another one is conflict resolution. If, for example, you're moving forward, how are we resolving conflicts with each other? Is we going to sue each other? No. Are we going to take it through arbitration? That's my preferred method. But the better method is to avoid conflict from the start. And the way to do that is as you move along, as you come upon something that needs to have some sort of clarification on it, write it down. Come to the agreements early on. So that way there's no misunderstandings. For example, on the bank, I'll just use that as an example. Who's the primary on the bank account? I don't know. Do you? You didn't write it down. If you did write it down, then you would know that there is one primary for the account. Ours, for example, is Melissa. So it avoids conflicts, because any monies that go through our bank account have to centrally go through Melissa. So that way there's no misunderstandings. And that's in my opinion, some of the number one ways that companies fail that I've seen personally is that there's usually huge misunderstandings between the partners and the founders and stuff because they didn't write anything down. So he said, she said at that point. Everything has to be in a point to where if it did have to go to an arbitrator, that there would be some sort of a blueprint as to what was supposed to be done and what wasn't done or what did do. So conflict resolution is avoidable totally, So another one is like confidentiality. Within our company, so to speak, there isn't really a confidentiality agreement because quite literally we're trying to make everything as public as possible. So there isn't a necessity for us to like have a conflict or a confidentiality non-compete agreement because we're not into that right now. A non-compete agreement, for example, in our company would be for like Melissa. She has her own construction company right now where they do high-end customs and stuff, and I've got my own stuff that I do. But this company specifically is set up for single-family residential. And there's no conflict there because Melissa doesn't do single-family residential on that scale, and I'm not doing it at that scale either, and neither is Jim. So we're all coming together with this. Another one is like intellectual property. With us, everything that's developed within the company as intellectual property, we keep it in with the corporation. The corporation actually owns the intellectual property as we're moving forward. The plans that we put together, for example, those are copyrighted by We Build Houses Incorporated, our company. That's, in my opinion, is the better way, because if something were to happen to me, for example, or something happened to somebody else, then the company as a whole can move on. Because the company is an individual itself. It's its own individual entity that you're setting up right now. Another one is an exit plan. Okay. Now everybody's like, well, what do you mean by the exit plan? How much money we're going to make when we sell the company? No, not necessarily. It's if, for example, if you're moving forward and someone in the company isn't working out properly, or somebody's not meeting up to their what everybody's expectations were. The roles and responsibilities were set, but now all of a sudden you're not fulfilling your portion of the roles and responsibilities. Well, how do you do that? What's the exit plan? What's the strategy of it? My opinion is that if you work these things out as you go through with a founder's agreement, that's the best way prior to setting up your C corporation. That's what we've been doing. As we've been moving along, for example, we found things that who's taking over this role of responsibility. We have meetings every Wednesday, every week, once a week, specifically to delineate and to spell all these things out. That's within our company. Now, our company, We Build Houses Incorporated, we are now a corporation filed, official, and ready to go with the state of Arizona. So now what we're doing is we're incorporating the founders agreement as sort of like a contract into the corporate bylaws. And the corporate bylaws are in essence the same as what a founders agreement are. So it's easy to kind of copy paste those over to the corporate bylaws. But within those corporate bylaws also, there's a lot of room in there, because every board meeting we're coming up with different things that need to be input into that the corporate bylaws. With that also, policies and procedures moving forward. So founders agreements are, in my opinion, some of the most there's so many companies, small companies that I see that have no founders agreement. They have no operating agreement, hardly, just a copy paste something they got off the internet. That it's just terrible. So take your time, get it set up right. That's what we're doing, because if you're going to scale, you got to have all this foundational work done in the beginning. And then again, as you go along, you find things like who's getting the insurance, who's doing this, who's doing that, whatever. Once those questions come up, and then don't just take it on for yourself, for example. Don't just say, oh, I'll just go get the insurance. No, write it down. This person is responsible for maintaining and operating the insurance, for example. Or this person is responsible for maintaining and operating the field operations. Or this person is responsible for maintaining and operating whatever it happens to be. If there's no systems and processes in place within your company, you're destined to fail. So I hope this helps. If there's any other questions you have, put them in the comments or send me something, and I will try to answer them as best you can. Follow along with us as we begin to build this company. This is day one for us. So we're now, like I said, morphing our founders agreement and putting it into our corporate bylaws. So I hope this helped. Let me know.